enhancing aircraft operational readiness is our first topic here. So, gentlemen, what steps do you take to reduce the downtime and improve aircraft availability for operational use?
Well, in a high cadence operation, you have to look at your reliability numbers. That's what we use a lot. So we have, known issues, known failures that will cause an event to last, several days. So those are the parts that we tend to stock more of. We try not to rely on our vendors as much as possible, and to carry all our AOG needs in-house.
Yeah, I would agree with Bruce on that topic. Is knowing what your reliability issues are with your airframe, and stocking those parts, and kind of relying on yourself, kind of vertical integration of a maintenance department, keep everything in house, and you can control things better. Adding to that, I would say, as far as availability and reducing downtime, knowing and understanding your aircraft's maintenance planning document, how the maintenance inspection program is laid out, and developing and packaging your work scopes during your scheduled maintenance inspections to capture as much as you can for that event. So maximizing your downtime, your scheduled downtime, and a lot of that, and that varies from department to department. Depends on what kind of operation you have. But that definitely, working with your chief pilot, your scheduling department, and kind of get an idea how to project out, that helps tremendously in keeping your aircraft available for your company or your principal.
And I would follow on the parts as well. I think especially since COVID, logistics for parts on any airframe, any platform, is becoming more and more difficult, and it's seeming as the years progress here since the pandemic, it hasn't seemed to get much better over the years. If anything, it's gotten worse. So simple parts that you'd think a manufacturer would have in their warehouse, they don't, and they have to go directly to the vendor. And now we're looking at counter shipping. So and there's all sorts of possibilities for errors in that chain. So parts and training, I guess, is the other thing that I was going to throw in to the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big proponent of technical training, and knowing these airplanes like the back of your hand definitely makes for a more efficient troubleshooting process when you do run into issues on the airplane. I don't know how you guys feel about training, but I rate it pretty high on my list.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. Knowledge on the aircraft, and continuing knowledge, not just in the initials, continuing to learn and going out. One of the notes I had in here for this answer was coordinating on a frequent basis with your technical representatives for your aircraft, and figuring out what are the issues today. And you'd be surprised, a good conversation with them, you get some great tips, and that certainly helps a lot. Yeah, Derek, it's funny you mentioned the parts. The first thing that you and I talked about this morning.
Yeah.
As soon as you got online, I said, "Do you have a fuel probe for a Falcon?" So it remains an issue, and you have to be very, very proactive, kind of what Bruce was talking about, and stocking those parts.
Right. 90% of my fleet is manufactured overseas. So there's that part of it that you cannot fix one way or another. So you just have to prepare.
I hear from operators really all over the country and all over the world how challenging it is to source some of these parts. And, we had a question come in through the chat here that I think is interesting. How have OEMs and parts providers performed in keeping your flight department efficient, and what can they do better towards that end as you're specifically, I think, as you're trying to source those parts and stay ahead of the parts procurement problem?
Yeah, I think Derek mentioned a downturn in availability throughout COVID that's really affected a lot of these manufacturers. And now, as we're seeing them try to ramp up their production again, they're going back to these vendors and finding out that some of them have gone out of business. Mm-hmm. And they're not able to to support their overhead without the interaction from these large customers, right, with the different manufacturers. So, I think in a lot of cases, what manufacturers can do to help facilitate that is, kind of a health check on their suppliers to make sure that, they're still surviving, that they have enough business to keep the doors open and the lights on. Whether or not there's a demand on the parts, maybe they can push something else through those vendors that make those small key parts that you can't live without.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We often don't see that side, and I never have myself, but I imagine that if you take a look at all the parts and components that make up an aircraft and all the different manufacturers that are involved, how many levels there are for a manufacturer to manage and to keep after. And I just off the top of my memory, I recall when they were making the G500 that there was issues with the manufacturers for the thrust reversers of that engine and the cells, and so they rely. There's a lot of reliability. The manufacturers rely on this person, so it's very, it's a hard thing to manage. Supply chain is a tough thing to manage today, especially in aviation. It's tough to manage. So I think it's getting better. Although I hear you can't find a Hawker windshield, so at all. So
windshields are difficult to begin with, just as a whole.
If anyone out there knows how to make a windshield, I suggest you start working. You can make a good amount of money.
Fantastic. Well, the poll that we just popped up. So, what is the biggest challenge you face when optimizing aircraft turnaround times? The response that we got was pretty overwhelmingly managing non-routine maintenance issues that arise, during turnarounds. So, you guys want to speak a little bit to how you handle non-routine maintenance and maybe share some tips and tricks towards that end?
Sure. I mean, as far as our operation is concerned, we're pretty heavy as far as our cadence. So we have about 15 minutes to turn an aircraft on a regular basis when we're in the middle of our operation. 30 minutes is basically the longest we would like. So if we have a mechanical during that time frame, we have maintenance on staff pretty much around the clock. So when they come into the main base here, we have maintenance here. We have line techs here that'll, be able to diagnose and deal with some of the issues, but it's primarily our mechanics on the third shift, as we're a nighttime cargo operation. We also employ an on-call mechanic strategy to help those in between hours. So, a lot of communication through our dispatch and our communication center, and just making sure that everybody's informed so we can, make a decision and proceed forward as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we tend to forget as technicians when we're troubleshooting, especially on the line or an AOG situation, is the communication with your dispatch, communication with the crew, because you have to keep them up to date, almost hourly, maybe even more frequently, because it can really affect your operation. So if they need to start making plans, if they have passengers on board, maybe they're going to make alternate plans and get some ground transportation. Or if you're lucky enough to have a multi-aircraft fleet, you may have to send in another airplane. So, which involves more crewing. So keeping your scheduling department up to date as to what's going on and when they can expect the next update, that always helps as well. When they can expect the next update. So communication is a big piece of that as well.